Okay, so it is now time for the financial focus portion of this webinar. So in this section here, we're going to be talking about how much do you need to retire. So like many of these webinars, if not all of the webinars, this came out of a conversation I had with a class attendee. So I teach these classes in different areas and webinars that carry all around the country. And we talk about retirement planning. So this is a really great 6-hour, 2-day course. And people come to me with their questions after. So I love teaching the course, and I really love having these one-on-ones after. So this fellow was saying, we were talking about his goals for retirement. He says, I want 10 million. And I said, okay, well, that's good. It's a good goal. I mean, 10 million, I think most people out there would be happy with that. And I said, how'd you come to that 10 million? And he said, well, that's just what I want. And so I was digging in a little bit, and I said, and we were talking more now. Now, he's about 65 years old. He wants to retire at 70. He has 2 million now, and he wants to get to 10 by the time he's 70. So just think about that for a minute. That's a lot, right? From 2 to 10 in 5 years, you got to either be making a whole heck of a lot of money, and you can put that money aside, or geez, you better hope for some just astronomical, unlikely returns. You've got to hit everything. You have to find those diamonds in the rough. Whatever cliche works for you, you've got to find those individual positions that are just going to skyrocket. So this person had an unbelievable amount of stress because he's put this high goal on himself when maybe he doesn't have to. So as we dug into it, we started talking about, well, okay, how do we really identify a dollar amount? Is it a dollar amount that is it 2 million, 5 million, 10 million? Is it, or is it, and is that driving now what we can spend? Or is really the goal your income and expense needs? So how much income do I need to continue to realize during retirement? Because we all hit the same situation, and all retirees do. You work your whole working years, so we always refer to it as you're a saver and a spender. So you're saving some, you're spending some, and then suddenly during retirement you just become a spender. So you really want to replace that income. It's really what's coming out of your investments you're receiving from maybe Social Security, pension, whatever your income streams are. That's your income in retirement. So what are really the goals? Identifying a dollar amount, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million in this person's case, or identifying your income and expenses that you need. Well, so they're really the two questions. But now let's dig into our feelings about things. What are you really looking for? So now practically, we're talking about dollar amounts, income and expenses, or just top line dollar amounts, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, for example. And then I said to him, well, what most people really want is comfort and confidence in retirement. You want the comfort to be able to do what you want to do. And you want the confidence to know that you're going to be able to do it for the rest of your life. And he says, yeah, that's exactly what I want. Well, sure, that's what everybody wants. They want comfort and confidence. They want to make sure that, okay, if I'm retiring today, it's May 21st, 2025. Today is my day for retirement. I want to retire in comfort. I don't want to have to skimp. I don't have to worry about going back to work. I don't have to worry about, not shopping organic, whatever your thing is. Not taking the trips, not doing that. I want to have a comfortable retirement. Now that might be, it's very, very different for everybody, of course. And if we have time, we'll talk about that a little bit. But now that we know that the goal is truly to have comfort and confidence in your retirement, well, then to me, it becomes pretty simple. Because now if the idea, and I'm sharing my whiteboard now for those of you just listening. And I've got some outlines here. I said, what is the goal? We just talked about that. Identifying a dollar amount, whether it's 2 million, 5 million, or 10 million. Here you go. Or expenses and income. Making sure that now that I'm a spender, that I can do all the spending I want to do and pay for the things I want. Well, once we identify that the true goal in retirement is comfort and confidence, I think it becomes obvious what the dollar goal is. The dollar goal comes back to expenses and income, because if we can, this person said that they wanted to spend $200,000 a year, and that's an after-tax number. That's a 2025 after-tax number. Now, we're going to talk about that a little bit too. But if he can spend $200,000 a year, and he can do it with only $2 million, does he need 10? No. Not if his true goal is comfort and confidence, which is what most people's goal is in retirement. Now, there can be a lot of different goals around that. I'm not saying, you're just living in your feelings. It can be, well, I want to, everything that can be about that. I want to do the spending I want to do. I want to travel. I want to buy a vacation home. I want to leave $1 million to each of my kids. Whatever your individual goals are that build into that, my comfort and confidence in retirement, that is all important and valid and all part of it. But fundamentally, it comes back to this: comfort that you're going to be able to do what you want to do in retirement, and confidence that you're going to be able to do it for as long as you're alive, and meet those goals. So that goes back directly to expenses and income, as I said, because if you need $10 million to have your comfort and confidence and to reach those spending goals that you want, then that's your goal. But if you could do it for 2 or 5, why would you strive for more? If you end up with more, that's great. But in this person's case, when I said that to him, I saw the ease, even across the camera. We were on a Zoom meeting. Even across the camera, I saw the ease. Now, I'll share with you that ease in people's eyes or even their body is one of my favorite things, because people hold a lot of anxiety about retirement, and it keeps them up at night. It makes them probably not have that as much time here on this planet because of the stress involved in it. But once you see people ease and say, oh, well, that makes sense, because I could suddenly see the wheels turning, that he was saying, well, maybe he doesn't need $10 million. Maybe he can do it with 5, and 5 from 2 over 5 years is much less. But geez, what if he could just do it with 3 or 2.5? Because if the goal truly is $200,000 after tax, that is much more achievable when you consider pensions, Social Security, withdrawals from your savings, than just shooting for a $10 million goal by the time you retire in 5 years. $200,000 spending is much more doable. Now, there's so you can now that you know what the goal is. Now, how do you reach that goal? So you become clear on your focus. You identify true needs, goals, and potential issues. So you've heard me talk about this. We have a process we walk through with people in their financial planning process. So we've developed a spreadsheet that we use for expenses. We've developed this over the last 20 some years. I've been doing this. That really helps shake those trees, because it can't just be, so this is very common. This person, let's just carry this down. He said, I want to spend $200,000 a year after tax during retirement. It's almost never that. There's a couple different reasons it's almost never that. First of all is most people don't track their expenses that closely. It's usually just a guesstimate, and guesstimates are not good. Even if you're the engineering type, we have a lot of clients as engineers. I've talked about that, or who are engineers, and they come to us and say, I've been tracking my expenses for the last 35 years on a spreadsheet, and I'll share that spreadsheet, and you'll see I know exactly what we have to spend. Rarely is that truly the whole picture. Many times taxes are omitted, or certain surcharges, things like that. It could be one of my favorite ones is pet care. People often say, "Oh, I didn't realize I spend $5,000 a year in pet care." But become clear on your focus. Identify true needs, goals, and potential issues. This is where we really help here. Well, we help with all of it. Identify the true needs and goals, because 200,000 might be 220,000, might be 250,000. So you've got to identify all that. You really have to shake those trees. And there may be many things, even if you have your 35-year spreadsheet, there may be many things that you haven't even considered. Things like higher taxes, because most financial planners, most financial advisors aren't even allowed to talk about tax planning. Things like higher taxes, things like Medicare surcharges, things like, heaven forbid, dramatic market losses or high investment expenses. You've got to identify all these potential issues. Then you develop an investment savings strategy to fund your needs, goals, and issues. So you've got to get clear on that. What's your goal? Become clear on the focus. Identify true needs, goals, and potential issues. Really shake those trees. And then develop an investment saving strategy to fund needs, goals, and issues. So I have savings in parentheses there because if you're retired already, you're done saving. But if you're still working, you need an investment and saving strategies. Then you have to stress test these things. So it's not uncommon for us to see, well, geez, you see some kind of chart in a financial plan, so here's your financial plan, and it shows, well, here's retirement for you, and here's your date of death, let's just say 95. They project out to 95. And look at this. If you continue to save, well, geez, you're gonna have $10 million. There's his $10 million number. You're gonna have $10 million by the time you're no longer here. Well, the problem is that most of these plans and most of these planners fail in a couple different areas. Well, first is they never truly identify the needs, goals, and issues. They just say, oh, you say you need to spend $10,000 a year? They write that down. They put that into their system, into this planning software. They don't really identify, do the work. You have to do the work to identify that $10,000 really might be $12,000 a month. So you've got to do the work first. The second thing is they don't really look at the stress tests. So oftentimes they'll look at the market stress test. What if we have some negative markets? And they use that Monte Carlo, simulation. We do that too. Monte Carlo is important. But a market stress test, for example, sometimes brings us down to here where you've got risk of running out of money. Sometimes it may bring it out here where you say, okay, instead of $10 million, you potentially have $1 million at the end of your lifetime. If we have some negative markets that are at a bad time for you. But then we also want to look at, what if we have higher taxes? Again, this is one that usually isn't talked about. Now that is another stress test that pulls us down and gives people a risk of potentially having less money to spend in their lifetime, maybe running out of money, or being able less money to do what they want to do. And then lay over both of those potential market fluctuations, a repeat of the Great Recession, for example, and higher taxes. We see a lot of really pie in the sky, rosy glasses kind of rose-colored glasses kind of plans suddenly start to struggle. So you've got to you have to do the proper stress tests. And you've heard me say this. This isn't on here, but you have to do this every year. You have to go through this process every year. This financial planning, really shaking the trees process. Now, once you have that developed, you come up with. Now you've got your savings and investment strategy. So some popular withdrawal strategies we're going to talk about. Well, the first is the 4% rule. So we go back to sound bites. I talked about sound bites at the beginning of the webinar, so the weekly webinar. So if you wanted to listen to the weekly webinar, you can go back and listen to that if you're just listening to the financial focus. Oh, and by the way, I've got a note here. If you like this video so far, or you like my videos, please remember to subscribe. And if you like them, maybe a like would be nice. And if you want to be notified of new videos, hit that notification button as well. But the withdrawal strategies. Let's talk about withdrawal strategies. So we have this 4% rule. So the 4% rule looks something like this. Here's the time that you retire, 2025. This goes out all the way until you're no longer here. Right? That's the goal. And they say, let's use $2 million, for example. You have $2 million. And if you don't withdraw more than 4%, depending on how you're invested, then you shouldn't outlive your money. So, and that 4% rule actually should be adjusted for inflation. So I'm just going to say adjust it for CPI, Consumer Price Index. Let's use that as inflation. So what that takes us is $2 million a year, $80,000 before tax. And it's really a straight line. So you get to spend off that $2 million, and it's not just earnings, it's earnings and withdrawals. $80,000 adjusted for inflations over your lifetime. So that might be completely fine for you. Is it fine for the person that we talked to? No. Remember, his need that he said was $200,000, and we don't even really know if that's the real need yet. But the 4% rule could be too limiting early in your retirement because he's got things now. He's got a gap. Let's say he gets $40,000 worth of Social Security. So that takes him up to $120,000 a year. And he still is not meeting his needs in retirement. He's still not feeling that comfort and confidence in his retirement. He might be confident that he's going to have money at the end of the year, or at the end of his lifetime, if in fact the 4% rule works out, which I would argue, carries a lot of risk. But he doesn't have the comfort in his retirement because he's not doing what he wants to do. He's keeping himself to this $120,000 a year. So the 4% rule is one of those sound bites, things that people feel some level of comfort in because they've heard it so many times. But the reality the reality of financial planning is, over my more than 2 decades experience, is that most people's savings or spending look more like this. So there's things you want to do early in retirement. So these are the early years of retirement. There are things you want to do in those early years of retirement. So you're going to spend more. You're going to try. You not only have your basic expenses, but you're going to want to travel. You're going to want to visit. Whatever your goals are, whatever's going to bring you that comfort in retirement, and acknowledge that all the work you've put into this is worth something. So there are things you want to do. So we do slow down. We do tend to slow down, and there's been references to these are your go years, these are your slow go years, and then these are your no go years. Because if you retire at 65, let's just say, that's a pretty straight that works out. Slow go, no slow go, no go. But again, these are sound bites. We like jingles in our head, right? We like to hear these things. But the reality is that while you may slow down here, and this takes us to like 75, 80, let's say, while you may slow down, maybe you're not traveling as much. I'll tell you that the retirees I know a lot of them, they're still very, very active, well into their late 70s, 80s. My own mother-in-law is 85 years old, and she does Pilates several times a week. She's always doing something. Even though she just had her knee replaced, she's still very, very active. But and even, we may slow down a little bit, but then as we age, we increase our costs, and that is usually due to medical. So this is really what you have to plan for in retirement. So you can plan to spend more. Maybe he gets up to $200,000 a year. If that's truly his number that he can spend, that drops down. And then we also have to plan for this to be able to pick up. So how do you do all of that? Well, the 4% rule doesn't work, right? Because it's that this linear one. Just, hey, let's just live off of just budget in the beginning what we have, and let's hope it lasts, based on this rule. And the 4% rule was made up by a financial advisor way back in the 90s, by the way. So it's not in my opinion, a well-proven strategy at all. There's been a lot of people who say, well, it should be 3%. Not about 10 years ago, there was conversation about 2.5%, but really none of those, in my opinion, are the way you should be doing things. And then you hear some people talk about, I've heard this a lot lately, well, I'm going to live off my interest and dividends. So living off your interest in dividends carries a tremendous amount of uncertainty and risk, because the dividends and interest you're getting today might be significantly different than the dividends and interest you're getting in just 6 months. So, you can still get a 4.25% money market today. I saw, I got a report yesterday of some annuity companies that are paying 5.25% over the next 5 years. I don't know how long that's going to continue. Interest rates are still inflated. When we get some stability in the economy, it's likely to balance back out to lower interest rates. But the thing is that it carries a lot of uncertainty and a lot of risk when you're just living off of interest and dividends for not only your investment, but your earnings. I was talking to a fellow yesterday. He said, I'm thinking about switching to high yield bonds to get more interest, but I don't want to take a lot of risk. Well, high yield bonds are junk bonds, corporate junk. So lower rated, more risk, right? So that less ratings, more risk you have. They don't want to call them junk bonds, so they call them high yield bonds. You get higher yield, you get that higher interest because you are taking more risk. That's why you get more interest, because you're taking more risk. That's all well and good if that's what you want. But you better understand what you're getting into, because those corporate bonds can default. They can stop paying. They can do, there's a lot of things they can reduce. There's a lot of things that they can do. So, what you hear us talk about a lot is this account segmentation. So account segmentation makes sense to me, because if we take this same timeline, so we start here in 2025, if that's your retirement date and your goal was to have money here until you're no longer here, we break up the funding into segments of time. So it's typically 0 to 3, 4 to 6 years. These are years. 7 to 9, 10 to 13, 14 to 17, and then 18 plus years. So I'm not suggesting that you're going to pass away in 18 plus years. This is just, what this sketch allowed for. And then you figure out those needs, goals, and issues, those expenses in the income, what's going to bring you comfort and confidence during that time. So let's just start with comfort. So if your comfort is, in this example, $200,000 a year, for the, in the beginning of your retirement after tax, well, we want to fund 3 years. So that 200,000, you're going to need 600,000 here. And then in the next 4 years, you spend time, you do the work, you have to do the work. You figure out, okay, because some people say, I'm probably going to spend about $10,000 a year on vacation, but the first 3 years, I want to spend $30,000 a year on vacations. So your cost might be higher in those first 3 years. So maybe you need $600,000 in those first 3 years. Maybe you only need $300,000 in those next 3 years. But heck, let's call it another $600,000. And maybe you need another $300,000 here. Maybe you need much less. But these dollar amounts continue for each of these segments. So the first question is, well, how do we figure out how much we need in each segment? Well, you figure out your segment funding by proper financial planning. And it has to be reviewed every single year. That's how you figure out your funding amount. Now that you figured out your funding amount, now you can take your bucket of money, your $3 million, for example, and instead of just counting on a single allocation with those $3 million of funding that entire period of time in your retirement, you spin off different investments, different accounts to fund each one of these segments over your lifetime. Most conservative over here, growing more aggressive and growth oriented as we reach out later in time. So you've got this is very little or no risk. This increases your growth as you go out. And then once you have that established, these separate accounts are set up to fund each one of those time periods. Now, once you have that established, can you set it and forget it? Absolutely not. You have to continue to shift your investments down to fund each pocket of your time, each segment of your time. And each one of those little portfolios demands a lot of focus and management to make sure that the asset allocation, the investment selection is appropriate in each one of those. So that is account segmentation. So in a very quick nutshell, because we're almost at the top of the hour, if you want to learn more about account segmentation, you can dig into it, and we'll put a link here for our 3 pillars video that, again, we just seem to be talking about this all the time. The reason we talk about it all the time is because there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty, and it applies. Because if your funding is laid out, you know exactly where your first $600,000 is coming from. You're getting a good interest return on that, and you're getting some earnings, but you're taking no risk. And if the market drops 40%, you know that I'm going to be fully funded for this, and I can do the travel, I can have the fun, I can do all those things. That's going to give you the comfort. The next segment over here, the 4 to 6 years, you're not going to start tapping into that segment for another, until year 4. That may have a little more growth opportunity, therefore carry a little bit of risk, but it should be a very, very tight margin. There are things that we do to minimize risk in those portfolios that I can't get into now, but that's going to carry much less risk than just the general stock markets or even bond markets. And so, you're looking at this, your funding is coming from these 2 segments for the next 6 years. So that increases the comfort. Now you see you have these individual accounts that are allocated appropriately for you because you've identified these numbers. You've put in the work. You've identified the numbers of what you're going to need to fund your entire amount of your retirement. And maybe you have some left over that we call legacy longevity. Often this is hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, that's available for you if you need it during your lifetime, but will probably pass to the next generation or to your heirs. So you've identified what you need during your lifetime, plus other money in most cases that you can tap into if you need to. So it brings you the comfort and it brings you the confidence that you're going to have this for the rest of your life. And it's appropriately set up, not of, oh, heaven forbid, I'm going to try high yield bonds and see if that works because I've read about it and it may make sense. Maybe not considering all the risks involved. So I'm not being critical to that. If that's coming off as critical, I apologize. But I'm not being critical to that person. But this is what people do. So doesn't that make more sense? Isn't that this is designed to give the comfort and confidence you need during retirement? Because that, folks, is truly the goal. It's a little bit of a trick question, right? How much do you need to retire? You need the amount that's going to generate the income and expenses laid out appropriately. The income and expenses that you identify, you got to do the work. You really have to become clear on the focus, identify true needs, goals, and potential issues, and then develop your strategy once you have that. Because the true goal is comfort and confidence. Comfort that you're going to be able to do what you want in retirement, and confidence that it's going to last your lifetime. Okay, so that, my friends, is the financial focus for today. I hope that was beneficial. I hope you learned something today or reinforced maybe something you knew before. Even if you've heard this discussion before about the account segmentation process, financial planning process, identifying goals, it's always good to review. I had a client who's been a client for 5 years in our recent class at Holy Family University. And he said, it was really good to sit through this because it just reinforced, like, I remember sitting in this class 5 years ago and I understood some of it. Much of it went through me because there's a lot of information. And I understand that the things we deal with in financial services industry and wealth management and financial planning are complex. This stuff is not easy. Even if it seems simple, it is not easy, especially staying on top of it and doing it the right way, in my opinion. Managing taxes, doing all the things that we do. So reinforcement is really important. So I don't mind repeating these things. Repetition is important. It's important for you to stay on top of things. It's important for you to keep your mind open. It helps you. It helps you push away these silly sound bites that we hear. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you got a lot out of that. I'd love to hear your feedback. I see a question here. Somebody take the question quickly from Roseanne. Mark, when you take a distribution from either traditional or Roth, is it the IRS who is tracking whether the money is applied against the order of distributions, beginning with your contributions? Roseanne, so we're talking about Roth when we're talking about ordering rules, and it's automatic. They don't track it. It's just how they consider it. But good question. And that goes back, folks, if you're listening to the Financial Focus only, that goes back to our Slott report mailbag and a report we did earlier in the weekly webinar. If you want to go back and watch the weekly webinar, please do. That's a full hour of we talk about some IRA distribution issues and updates, and then we talk about the markets, and then this last half hour is typically the financial focus. But I hope you all have a great week. I hope this was helpful for you, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.